Hey out there, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about improvisation. Specifically, I'll address some things with jazz improvisation. But the reason I want to do this is because of the misconceptions that are still out there, the things that are said about it. Even today, I heard, a reference to not sure how people improvise. It just seems like they're just able to do it, and there was a little bit of a history, for any of you that have investigated, or maybe you know someone that taught in such a way where there's this aura about improvisation, and they seem to treat it as this mystical thing or something that is untouchable. It's something that you can't really teach. And I'll give the argument for that, or when some people say that, I'll say that, there is a certain element about it that seems otherworldly at times. But really, there's some specific things that you can do to address it and work on it. But some of this even goes back to the earlier days in improvisation, where you had some that would work on material. And you have to think, if you're someone who's working a lot and trying to discover elements of improvisation, stuff about your own playing, you're figuring out all these things, and it's in the earlier stages where there's not a lot of theory-based ideas around what's being done, and it seems like there's this whole other world you're getting into. There was this sort of, I'm going to keep that to myself, and because I'm working so hard at it, those people that are going to come to me and just ask me just to give them the information, I'm not going to do it, because they need to work on it and take the time to discover their own path. Now, that could be for good or bad. Some may hold that close to them because they don't want to share those secrets, and then the person starts to basically sound like them because they're taking everything that they worked on. There's that fear that seemed to be put out amongst groups of people. But then you also have the other side of really just pushing the person, the student, the apprentice that is working on the material, to go into a state of self-discovery and find their own path. So, I get that if you look at it in some of those terms of keeping it hidden, it can seem like it's otherworldly or it's something that you can just never touch. But it's just not true. It's not true. You can. Now, to whatever extent you get there, becomes a process that you have to go through. It's something that you have to explore. Depending on the music that you listen to, your technical facility on your instrument, your grasp of musicality in general from listening to a lot of different artists and songs, all goes into the formation of your improvisation. So, some people may improvise at, we'll call it a lower level. It's something that doesn't sound overly complex. It's something that could sound very simple, or maybe not even guided so much. It seems like the person that's improvising is kind of rambling on a bit. Now, this also has to be viewed in the point of what context are you playing in. So, in the context of different styles of music, the degree of complexity that you use can be affected. Because if you take someone that is improvising in country music or bluegrass music or in a pop setting or a rock setting or a jazz setting, classical not so much the case, it's just not something that's really there so much anymore. And for those classical musicians, maybe you can steer me in a different direction, but meaning that you had in the past these opportunities such as a cadenza where you could really showcase your technical facility and your abilities, and then over time that was geared more towards something that was written out specifically to play. So you have to keep that in mind. But overall, you're going to have a varying degree of levels of ability in improvisation. And for some people, they could work a lifetime and only hit a certain threshold. And that's just the way it is. Now, that doesn't mean that there's some kind of secret thing that they didn't discover. It doesn't mean that that there's this esoteric thing, which that could be a separate discussion, but it doesn't mean that there's this, you either have it or you don't. You can really work on some elements to develop your ability to improvise by setting up limited creativity is the term that I like to use for it. But basically, whenever you're improvising, and you could use something as basic as a scale, like a C major scale. Let's take that as our example. You can use the notes in the C major scale just out of context, as far as don't put a chord progression under it. Just play around with the notes and see what you come up with. Now, some of the things you come up with may be dependent on the motor skills that you've developed, right? The term that people like to use is muscle memory, but technically it's not muscle memory, technically muscle memory that we're using here. What it is that technical facility that you're gaining on the instrument. There's certain patterns, there's certain things that you play that becomes part of you. So if you notice someone that's improvising, especially on guitar, because I've seen this a lot over the years, when someone starts playing on the guitar and improvising, where do they start? And this could be for other instruments too, but they start by playing something, usually starting on the 6th string and running the scale up. So if I say improvise in C major, they'll start down on C and start running up and then coming back down. So low notes to high notes. So that's something that you train. Now you can break yourself out of that by saying, I'm not going to start on the lowest note, I'm going to start on the highest note. Or you could even separate out into, for guitar, different string groups, or you could limit yourself to certain note choices. That's one thing that you could do. Another is a certain rhythmic pattern that you could play. If you start to incorporate a chord progression, what you could do is say, I'm only going to play chord tones. I'm going to play chord tones, but I'm going to use a specific rhythm. I'm going to play in a certain meter. I'm going to try to imitate a melody I heard, which when you think of that, that could be the contour of the line plus the rhythmic component that makes that melody what it is, right? So if you have a line, it starts up high and starts to go down, and then maybe it drifts back up, and then it goes back down. You're looking at the contour of the line, and you could imitate that, and then add the rhythmic component to it that made that line what it is. That's without going into direct transcription and working out something exactly the way somebody else did, which is another side to it. But overall, what I'm throwing out here is that you shouldn't be intimidated by improvising. The level at which that you can gain access to is going to really be dependent on the amount of effort and time and the quality of the improvisers that you listen to as your influence. It's a plethora of things that you put together. It's not you have it or you don't. So I hope that helps if you're thinking about improvising and you're a little intimidated by it, especially in the jazz world, which does get a little bit more involved. But don't be afraid to improvise. Just pick a few notes and start to create melodies. It's as simple as that.